And when we had the opportunity to talk about working in this new environment, I had to really think about what has significantly changed and what value can I contribute to you all, understanding that every moment is a precious moment in your life. So I really kind of changed a little bit in terms of the theme because I firmly believe this is really important for the female leaders. As important also, thank you for all the male allies that are on the phone. It also applies to you. And then I did have preview to look at all the various questions that were submitted in advance. So thank you, Maria. There was a significant range, and what I thought I would do is throughout the presentation, you see a little A, and it's like my answer in terms of the questions that you had. At any one point, please ask questions along the way. At the end, I have Jess did a wonderful job of writing an article in terms of her adventures of starting a new company in the midst of COVID. And so while I could only speculate what it could look like, might as well share from firsthand experience. So Jess and I will have a dialogue to have talk about her experience, and we'll go from there. So my understanding is we have about 60 minutes, or actually now maybe about 50 minutes, and then we'll have another 30 minutes of Q&A. Okay? So we'll go through the content, and then we'll hold your questions. Hopefully we'll answer many of them, and we'll have 30 minutes for just an open chat. So super excited. We're doing this on a Friday, close of the week, beginning 3-day weekend. And what best to do is to talk about you and your career and what your amazingness of what you're able to do. So with that, I'm going to start sharing my screen, and tell me if you can you see it? Yes?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, hold on a second. Let me do it again. Hold on. Share screen. Okay. Can you see now?
Nope, not yet.
I have it up if you need as a backup.
Let's see.
Try again. I made you a co-host, so you should be able to share.
Okay, maybe that's it. Okay, let's see. Yes, that was it. I was not able to. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I switched it up a little bit because the premise is the same whether it's COVID or not. And it's one of the most important things that I talk about in terms of one's career, whether you are your own entrepreneur or you're in a large corporation, yet oftentimes never really considered. So when I ask the question to many individuals, like, how much do you spend time on your own professional development, on you as a CEO of your own career? Ironically, oftentimes I only get 1 or 2 hands that are raised. And it's because I think oftentimes society is like, go to the meeting, get the job done. And we often forget that part of getting the job done is about focusing on you and your career. So we're going to talk a little bit about that along the journey. And this is important because at all times we're formulating opinions about every single one of you. And I'd like to highlight, a quote that Jeff Bezos said is that, your brand and what you stand for is what people say when you leave. He used to say the room. Now I say Zoom. And so one of the things that gets highlighted in one of your questions is like, how are companies measuring your success in the world of COVID? And I'm like, it doesn't matter if it's COVID or not. They're measuring your success based on your output and your impact to your organization. And they're formulating the opinions about you. And I'll break it down a little bit further in terms of how that gets manifested. But if you're not paying attention about how you're being perceived by others, I will tell you everybody else is formulating opinions about you. It happens naturally. It's human psychology. We talk about others. The business community as a whole, no matter what industry you decide to pursue, is relatively small. So we're always asking questions about various individuals in terms of what he or she will bring to the table. I'm going to try to minimize this. Hold on a second. I see. Okay. So I want to give you an example in the world of COVID and what happens. I'm looking to hire somebody. And so I leverage, text messaging, and I'm like, hi, Natalie. I see your LinkedIn with Amy Johnson. I can look at who is applying and I can look at their network. She's applying for a job. Okay. And I tell her this in confidence. Do you know her? And if so, what's one word to describe her? And Natalie's like, yes, she's a bully. So that already puts that person out of contention in terms of the desire for me to interview this person, because from my standpoint and the culture that I cultivate, like, there's no rooms for bullies. What we appreciate and value are people that have vision, are able to execute, are collaborative, and are kind in nature. So that one particular trait about a bully in my organization would not necessarily have a fit. So what's important is, in the world of social media, like back in the days in the early 90s and when your parents were working, social media did not exist. And now the social media platforms, and really makes the world so small, because we have so much access and information about you. It's not just what you post on Instagram. I can see who you're networked with, and I can see if I know somebody, and I'm already formulating opinions before you even start to have a conversation with me. And this happens very quickly. So oftentimes people are like, how do I get in front of a company, or how do I get ahead? Just know, like, at this point in time, you're already establishing the likelihood of you being interviewed by a company based on how you show up in your personal life and in your professional life. And at the same time, it's extra hard for us females. I did this exercise last night, and it was very disappointing. With regards to COVID, and there was a question around, like, how is it different, and what should we consider in the world of COVID if you're working at a company? And I literally Googled this, woman working during COVID, and look at the pictures to the left. It's a woman with the kids trying to multitask, and on the right, it's like doctors and professionals without any kids. And I highlight this because I go back to your personal branding, and sometimes it's my responsibility to give you the brutal truth and honesty, is that when you're in business and any one person sees that you're surrounded and you're multitasking and you have a kid, similar to before COVID, if I was having a business dinner and I have my daughter calling me and I have to step out of that dinner and speak to her for about 30 minutes, I'm not getting applauded for being that amazing mom and showing up for my daughter because she needs me. I'm being judged that I'm more committed to my family than my counterparts. Now, if a male picks up the phone during dinner and comes back 30 minutes later, literally the perception is, oh my God, he's such a great dad. Look, he's engaged with his kids. And so I often tell individuals is realize that we are in an unlevel playing field. And so what that means is when these perceptions are being created around our workplace, specifically around COVID, because it becomes ever so personal. We have access to what your living room possibly looks like, what your background looks like, kids coming in and out. I share with females is that you have to ask for help. Because you are being judged and evaluated, and it's not fair. I wish this was not the case, but it is the case. I remember recently, during December timeframe, it's holiday, maybe some people were gathering together, and obviously it's not appropriate COVID, and somebody was making a comment about a particular woman who is in a senior role at a company, and did you see like her kids bouncing around in the back? Is she not disciplining her kids, etc.? So I highlight this because in one of your questions, and I know many of you, I'm a mom as well, you're juggling many things. And so now you have to figure out what is your game plan for what meetings, and I'll highlight a little bit, like when do you turn on your video and when do you turn it off? And how do you manage the various scenarios that you're going to have to interact with during COVID? Understanding that when a woman's committed to her family, it's viewed as she's more committed to that than her job. And it's the complete opposite in terms of the men. Now, when I started the conversation, I said, very few people raise their hand in terms of the investment that they have in themselves as a CEO of their own career. And you have to realize, like anything, for those of you that are really into physical, like working out, and you're allocating time to do weights, do cardio, run, do physical activity, your career is no different. You have to allocate that time so one, you can better understand your strengths, understand areas that you can improve on. I'll talk a little bit about networking. I know there's a question around networking, to become the best version of yourself, and also explore things about you that you never realized you were able to do. So as an example for me, I grew up thinking I was always going to be in the marketing track. I had this dream to be a CMO. And I also understood the importance of allocating time for myself, which meant once a month, every Friday, I would network and I would meet with various people in completely different functions, different industries. And I learned more about the role of a general manager and managing a P&L. And did you have to be super technical? So while I'm working for a technical company, and yes, I took some technical courses in my undergraduate degree, I did not choose an engineering career. I do not have a master's or a mechanical engineering or software engineering. So, but what I did learn is I do have all these different competencies that would help me potentially become a GM. And by doing so, when that opportunity showed up for me to pivot from marketing to a general manager role, I said, yes, I can. I had that confidence. Oftentimes females, we say no because we've never done the job before, but I became confident myself because I could translate my pedigree in marketing into the general manager role. And then I learned to flex muscles that I never knew existed. If I never did that, if I never spent time networking with other people, all I would have known, I literally would have had blinders on, and I would have thought, my only track, given what I studied and given my past experience, would have been the CMO track. And so that has been one of my greatest gifts in terms of really that opportunity, that exposure to do a career pivot. And that was only done because I allocated time for myself. So that's really important. And I highlight this because time is very precious, and so allocate time for yourself. And I like to highlight this because, branding as a concept applies to everyday business. And so why would they do that? Like, why do you spend multi-billion dollars in investing in branding for corporations and advertising and unique value proposition? Because if you look at them for reference, and then I'll show you how it applies to to an individual. I'm going to try to admit this person. Okay. So this is a little bit interactive, so you're going to have to go with me. Hopefully some people can chime in. I'm going to start with this because branding, whether for a corporation or for yourself, is agnostic. Because the concept of branding is really about setting a set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that, taken together, account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another. Okay, that's from a very famous marketing professor, Seth Godin. But let me translate this to a person. A person is the set of expectations, memories, and stories and relationships that, taken together, account for a hiring manager's decision to choose that person over another candidate. And a perfect example is Jess. I'll let you talk to the story of how I met you, because I think it talks about networking, how you introduced yourself, and how you landed a job at Intel.
Sure. Thank you. Well, also thank you for having me and letting me join you today. Thrilled to be here. I mentioned to Maria and Althea earlier that Sandra and I had met at an event 2 years ago. Sandra was speaking at a women's luncheon and I was just an attendee. She gave such an impactful lecture on breaking glass ceilings and getting through some of those tough scenarios that we as women are put in our careers. And I just knew as I was sitting there, Jess, build up the courage, just tell her this was inspiring, give her your card and walk away. And that's it. And so I went right up to Sandra afterwards and I said just that. I loved her talk. Here was my card. If there's anything I could do to help her, let me know. I went home and then made sure that I got in touch with Sandra on LinkedIn and I think Instagram at the time, just a couple of ways that we could keep tabs on one another. You know, when we meet people at conferences, it's really easy for names and faces to just fly by, but we stayed in touch with one another on LinkedIn and was early 2020, right? I'm like, the last year has been a wash.
2019, because you joined in 2020.
Yeah, so we met in 2019. By the time 2020 rolled around and a role was open on your team, I knew this was a woman that I wanted to work for and learn from. So I reached out to her on LinkedIn. I said, I don't know if you remember me. I'm that crazy girl that just kind of ran up to you at an event, but I'm really looking to transition out of venture capital into tech. And would you take some time to speak with me? And I think because I was my very honest, quirky self, I hope that's what we could call it, Sandra.
Yep.
She remembered who I was. And we had a series of phone calls with all of the various teammates to just see if we meshed well together before the formal interview process started.
And then she landed a job in our organization. But within her story, there's a couple of key things. One, she allocated time to attend a conference, which is about your own professional development.
Mm-hmm.
She knows, Jess, if you look at her pedigree and background, is a big advocate of women advancement. So she attended the Lunch and Learn so as part of her overall hustle. And the courage to reach out and introduce herself. And she made herself memorable because, and you use the word like crazy, but I think crazy is it's a very good term. Steve Jobs says the crazy and misfits are the ones that change the world. Mm-hmm. And so just by the way Jess connected the discussion I was having with something that was salient for her, she was able to create this memory. And that lasted. And when she reached out on LinkedIn, of course I remember you. And then when she reached out almost a year later on this mm-hmm. opportunity, it was easy. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember you. You are smart, different point of view, and you're aggressive in a good way. And so that's how she landed in an interview opportunity with us, albeit there was hundreds of candidates that submitted their resume. But it's that as an example that highlights kind of what Seth in this quote truly represents is, every interaction is a memory. I think I'm going to remember Althea. I've never met her in person or in a virtual conference, but you are very confident, and I will for always remember that. And I think it's those are the moments that you have moments to shine. And we'll talk a little bit about these opportunities that get presented for you and what you can consider in terms of really breaking through and differentiating yourself. As you go through what I call being your own CEO of your career, or a little bit more on the emotive side is your brand and your purpose, is really answering these questions. And these are not easy questions to answer. On my journey, and sometimes it's taken me multiple years, as you have different experiences, you grow and you evolve, you're always becoming, but really thinking about you were set on this earth for a very specific purpose. We're all uniquely different. Jess was here for her own purpose. I'm here for my own purpose, and really figuring out why are you here and what difference are you supposed to make in the world is a very important question and discovery that you have to go through, because the more you peel that onion, the closer you are going to be to really realizing success. And success, it doesn't need to be financial success. Success can be however you want to define it. But when you are successful, you are happy. And with that, I think in a macro perspective, the world is a happier place. And at the same time, as you're figuring out your purpose, you have to really understand, like, well, what makes you different? There's so many, I'm just going to pick, so I think there's a lot of data scientists here. There's so many data scientists. It became the hottest track in college to pursue. We know there's a battle for talent in this respective area. However, we know that there is supply out there, and how are we going to pick the best one? Is it the person that thinks about the world differently in terms of the ethical computing, psychological, sociological impact? Or is it somebody that really thinks about it from an engineering perspective and the zeros and ones and the algorithms? We, as individuals and as companies, we're all going to look for different traits based on the value of our company. But think about your purpose and what makes you different. In some cases, what you bring to the table honestly might not be right for a company X. And it's because your values are so different. And I had joined a company early in my career that I didn't realize the importance of values and understanding me and my values and my purpose, that there was always tension. I eventually left a year later because I'm like, this is just not going to work out. It's like oil and water. So for those that are looking at new careers and companies to join, I highly suggest that you spend time understanding the executive management, what they stand for. Like I said earlier, with social media, the world has become very small, very transparent, and do their values align to your values? What you want to see is synergies in order for you to be comfortable and able to show up at that company in a very safe space. And we are all human beings. We are all moved by like emotion, laughter, crying. And so you got to think about yourself in terms of your own value proposition and how does it drive an emotion towards somebody else. And I'm going to show you how this kind of breaks down. I started with companies, right? Companies spend multi-billion dollars in branding. And so, and Jess, I'm going to have you help me out here. So for those that, if we don't get participants, that I'm going to call out on 3 different brands and think of one word that it represents. So let's start with Virgin. So if somebody can speak up and say, okay, what would be that one word that would best describe Virgin?
Phone.
What was it?
The cell phone. Phone.
Virgin. Okay, cell phone. Okay.
Planes.
What was it, Anita?
Planes.
Planes. Okay. Well, if you look at Virgin as a whole, so phones, planes, there are many different businesses. But if you think about the emotion it evokes, it's fun. Think about the plane experience. I think it was Anita that highlighted the planes. When they were here in the US and had domestic Virgin Airlines, they disrupted the entire experience. I felt like I was going to a club. And that was fun. And if you think about Richard Branson, who's the CEO of Virgin, and you follow his Twitters, like I swear to God, if one day you just will need to have a laugh, just follow him because he's a fun guy. And so, and everything he touches and represents, Virgin, the brand, evokes fun, right? If we think about Nike, what does Nike represent?
Just do it.
What was it?
Just do it.
Just do
Just
it.
do it.
And then inspiration. Hi, Anita.
Yes. So
Hi,
like,
Tanea.
hello. So Nike is all about pushing us. Like, you can do it. You can be inspired. You know what, Colin Kaepernick, you did it. You challenged status quo. You made NFL feel so uncomfortable, and yet they took the risk to bring him on as an athlete. And so there are these companies that really understand the power of branding. And then you apply it to individuals, right? So let's take Greta. She's down here. What does she stand for?
Environment protection.
Yes, in everything she does, so brilliantly so. So she stands behind her words. She had to travel from, I think it was the US to Europe, and she did it on a boat. Wouldn't it be so much easier to do it on a plane? She has the courage to challenge CEOs. I saw it in person at Davos, like with the CEO, Mark Benioff of Salesforce, and said to them, how can you guys be for sustainability in the earth when you guys are flying private planes? And she said that in a large platform. You know, you have, I'm Latina, so I love my Frida Kahlo, but she was all about being herself and really bucking the norms. You know, she was kind of androgynous, the power of love and her, but she was gonna do her thing, right? And you can highlight, like Sandra, you've highlighted all these famous people. But then I would challenge you, like, think about like a Brad Pitt. Does he stand for something? No. These are individuals that have all had a purpose, and they knew what they stood for, even if it meant challenging the status quo. And I think when you think about these individuals, you start to think about you. Because in a startup, let's say you're looking for capital, it's you versus all the other startups that are making that pitch, right? If you're in a large corporation, at Intel, we're 110,000 employees, we're around the world. Never will I ever meet some of the colleagues that I interact with every single day in person. And so understanding who you are is your ability to differentiate. Now, I'm sharing this with you because the first part of my career, nobody told me this. I was one of the many. And so in a question that I got about what was that failure that you had, or what was that career defining moment, I had a couple questions like that. I would say the failure to understand what I brought to the business world by not accepting who I was. For most of my career, for most of my upbringing, I'm Mexican American. With that came a lot of assumed things about me. They would, if they knew that I was Mexican, they would think that I should have an accent. They would be challenged. I would be challenged, like, you're not Mexican, you're not dark enough. Okay, I don't know what Mexicans should look like. They assumed that my father's job was a gardener because that's what Mexicans do in California. They never asked what my parents did. They made an assumption. Well, I would ask my fellow, Caucasian friends, like, hey, what does your mom do? Or what does your dad do? There was, during the time, affirmative action. So in the 90s, that some of the underrepresented minorities were able to have an opportunity in college simply because they didn't necessarily have the right infrastructure in place. And while I never checked the box Mexican American because I hid my ethnicity, everybody thought I got into college not because of my brain or because what I did outside of school, but because they thought I checked box Mexican American. So my ethnicity it was hurting me. So I hid it for the first half of my career as well. And I also hid my gender simply because society taught me, and in order to survive in a business male dominated world, is I need to fit into the man's world. So the first couple of years, literally back in the day when we had to be like, there was like Friday casual day, and like you would wear khakis on Friday, you could never show up to work in jeans. I always wore a suit, which is a pantsuit, more fashionable than Hillary Clinton, but like a pantsuit. And my shoes were literally like, they looked masculine. So they had a square toe in the front and a square heel in the back. And I would learn how to play golf, even though I hated golf. So I could be invited to make deals on the golf course. And no matter how good I was or my other fellow female colleague was, we were never invited to the golf course. I would join them for happy hour and try to be the cool person that didn't have a personal life, because my fellow colleagues were married, but yet they were able to go have happy hour. And so I did everything just to be like one of the guys. And then there was this moment, and I often say, Intel gives you many gifts. There was this gentleman by the name of Ernie Felix in 2006, put a meeting on my calendar, and he's like, I would like to talk to you about Intel's Latino Leadership Council. And I just joined, and I'm like, what? Okay, I never talked about my ethnicity, but sure, I'm new to Intel, might as well take this meeting. And he talked to me about, the role I can play as a leader at Intel, being a Latina, being a woman. And I said to him, I go, Ernie, I was never involved in any ethnicity groups in college or my previous careers. And I've never made gender an issue. And he said to me, Sandra, can you honestly answer the question that being a Latina has never hindered your career? I'm like, nope, never hindered it. But subconsciously, that question never went away. Till months later, I remember this vividly, literally in the shower, I was like, wow, I don't think I've ever been who I am. I've been masquerading, hiding who I am, my identity. And so I began to enlist help. I think tools are always very important. I had the luxury in my company. And so some companies will provide executive coaching. So I had that. I went through a lot of self-help books. And I also enlisted a therapist to kind of work through what I was trying to do to be my unapologetically self. To embrace the fact that, wow, being Mexican-American means I'm bicultural and I can see the world very differently, because I lived in the US, and during the summer I would go to Mexico and I could see how different we all lived. Also, I was able to represent a growing majority that's 1.3 trillion, that contributes $1.3 trillion to the GDP. And then I'm a woman. Like, I represent 50% of the population. So why shouldn't I embrace things that happen in our womanhood to help create products and services for the 50% of the population? And so that was my journey, that for the first half of my career, I totally hit who I was. And when I really began to embrace my gender, my ethnicity, understanding what I'm really good at. Like, I like building things. So not only building businesses, but building the next generation, my career trajectory just took off. And I can honestly say that, I am the happiest version of myself, albeit, yes, there's still many obstacles. Like I've struggled with COVID. I used to travel 80% for my career. I'm a people person. When you extract all of that, it becomes really difficult. So then you have to enlist the next set of tools to get you through that experience and that journey and that obstacle. So that's really important. And in the process, you have to be very authentic. And I highlight how many times you don't even realize that society is dictating how you should behave. So, and even maybe your family and your friends. So as an example, culturally, my parents were very conservative Mexican, very religious. And there's this concept called respeto, so respect, in Latin culture. That means you do not challenge or question your elders, your parents, your abuelita, abuelito. You just obey. So imagine if you were conditioned like that for 20-something years of your life, and you go into corporate America, challenging your management or having different points of view, even with your colleagues that maybe have 2 years experience more than you do, was very difficult. And so then in the process, and I always kind of felt that I wanted to have my own voice, but I had to learn I had to learn to still value the concept of respect, but also having my voice in the business. So doing that in a way that's authentic to me. And that's where coaching or mentors really come into place. The other thing that's really important is that consistency is important. Like how you show up, whether it's the email that you're sending, whether it's how you show up to a Zoom meeting, whether how you follow up, whether it's the text message. Think about, I always say that every touch point is a touch point to help double down on your brand or to hurt your brand. And oftentimes just human psychology, it's been proven over and over again, is that when you do something that's off your brand, it really throws people off. So you can change and evolve and grow. And I often tell people, do that in baby steps, because then people get really disoriented when let's say you're introvert and then overnight you become an extrovert. And then what happens is like, what's going on with that person? Are they drinking? Are they, do they have any issues at home? So just remember that consistency is key. And when you're looking to grow and evolve and change maybe your purpose, do it with a thoughtful way. So understanding that the people around you are used to you showing up in a very specific way, but you can make pivots, because oftentimes I get questions like, well, if I'm this, but I want to change, how do I change? I'm like, you do that in baby steps. And the next thing is being relevant. Look, for data science, AI really didn't exist a decade ago. Yes, there were artificial intelligence, obviously with our government, but in major corporations, it didn't really exist. So when people are highlighting, hey, I need an expert, realize that there are experts being built every day in this respective space. So whether you're early in your career or whether you're in your 60s, AI is relevant, agnostic of age. And expertise is being built real time. So always be able to, when you're having conversations for jobs that maybe you're applying for, also, politely, depending on the person, is just like, so how long do you think AI, like when did AI really begin? And then they start to think about like, oh, well, maybe like 7 years ago, we start to think about it. So then, well, where does the expertise really begin to lie? And if you have those conversations, it helps drive awareness on the other side. But also always think about relevancy. If you are in marketing, think about the next generation, Gen Z. If you are in the automobile industry and your company is very big in terms of gas powered, but that we're moving in a sustainable world and the next generation is going to be into electric cars. Even if your company is not supporting that, you should be exploring and learning about electric cars in your side hustle as part of you being your CEO and developing yourself. So always look at trends. Trends are always changing and evolving. You would argue, I'm in sports media entertainment. One of the reasons why the sports industry is struggling is that they forgot to become relevant to the next generation, to provide experiences in terms of how they want to interact, because consumers are always going to make the call with their time and their wallet. One thing that I just highlight in terms of, as you defined your brand, I'll give you a little tool to think about this. I do think getting feedback from your individuals from both your personal and professional life is a fantastic exercise. I'll show you this little quick scorecard, and just think about like the importance of networking. Depending on where you want to go in your career, there are opportunities to network beyond just people. Like think about associations. In the marketing, there's a lot of different associations. In the sports industry, the same. Like whatever industry you're in, there are associations that you can participate in, some for free, some for a fee. In the world of engineering, there's the IEE. So that is available to you. It helps, being connected will help open doors. There are individuals. So oftentimes in any industry, there are the visionaries that you can follow. You can follow them. They're either represented in panels, they're posting articles on LinkedIn, or for that matter, they're contributing to the hot app called Clubhouse. So there's all these different sources to follow those thought leaders and opportunities maybe that you can actually have a conversation with them on a one-to-one basis. And then just think about, we can't emphasize this enough, all your social media, everybody pretty much has access to it somehow, some way. Even if you are the most private person, there's ways to find information about you. So just know whatever you're saying, every word matters, every picture matters. So just remember that there was a question about your personal and professional life. You have one life, and it is informed. There's your personal elements and there's your professional elements, and they become one. And in this world, especially with COVID, they have blended ever so much. So my suggestion is never try to separate your personal and professional life. Think about your life. And sometimes things that happen in your personal life, like I unfortunately had to go through a divorce, I told my team. And while it was so hard for me to share that, because in a way I also felt like I failed, I needed them to step up, because I was going through a roller coaster of emotions. And if I didn't share that with them, it goes back to I was being inconsistent. Like, what happened to Sandra? Is she going crazy? She's not her full self. And so instead of them creating the narrative, I told them what was happening. And I have to tell you, you'd be so surprised of the support you get emotionally and how they will rally and fill in for you in ways that you never anticipated. And for those of you that are leaders, sharing your personal stories actually invokes trust and psychological safety. Like, it's okay to talk about losing a loved one with Sandra. It's okay to say, you know what, mental health, like, I'm just not doing well right now. I need to take 2 days off. And when you foster that, you will get the best out of your employees as a manager. And for those that have managers that are a little bit more robotic, you have to just have open dialogue with them on a continuous basis. And the next set of leaders are going to have a very high EQ to help us kind of transition through what's happening in our society. Black Lives Matter. If you are of a Black background, it affects you at work, and being able to understand that. Social justice, all of this stuff, you don't leave it in your bedroom. It comes with you. And I think the more that we can challenge our managers to have those discussions, the better it's going to be, and the better leaders we are going to have, albeit it's uncomfortable for some that never were taught EQ, especially to recognize men in the US society are not allowed to have emotions. They're not supposed to cry because you got to man up. All of that they're bringing to the table as well. And so they're being challenged to be okay with their emotions and getting comfortable with that. So they too are going through their own journey. Here's something, and I'll share these slides. This one in specific in terms of your purpose. And a good exercise is to start to think about your passions, what you're really good at, your strengths, your experience, your values, what's important to you, and that you start to find a sweet spot of who you are that makes you very unique. Because I will tell you, there's no one person that will have the exact same brand architecture, Venn diagram as you. And so this helps you start to establish your blueprint. And this will help you to show up in the world of COVID and in the world when COVID passes. In your brand assessment, this is, I would say, what is that one word that will describe you? This is the one from Richard Branson, to have fun in my journey through life and learn from my mistakes. So mistakes are not failures. Mistakes are learning opportunities, and he finds the joy as long as you don't make the same mistakes a couple of times. But I always say, like, ask 2 friends, 2 colleagues, a boss, and an employee. And I do this once every like 2 years just to do a gut check. I went through this with a woman that I was mentoring. I have to tell you, she was so disappointed in her results. And she's like, this is not me. And I go, well, perceptions is reality. So where do you want to go? And how do we change how you want to behave in an authentic way to get more closer in line to the brand that you want to become? In the process of, I worked with her for about an entire year. She was in the completely wrong job. She pivoted to a completely different job, and she couldn't be happier. And then I think she got promoted, and now she's a VP in that particular role. But it helps drive self-awareness of how other people perceive of you and how far off it is from what you perceive of yourself. And I always like to say, networking's gotten me to where I am today. 60% networking, 30% is intellect, and 10% is pure damn luck. And I say this because I have always been recruited for the next job. There are opportunities to be in advisory boards, but that's all because of my network. The opportunity to speak at Davos, that was always because of my network. So men do this very well. So the females on the call, you're going to do this really well, just like the men. And here's the difference. When we females say that we're going to go network, it's really like, I'm going to go build my best friend. No, in the business world, it's not about best friends. It's about networking in, networking out, and networking wide. Keyword is wide. Put as many people on your Rolodex as you possibly can. And networking doesn't mean that you need to nurture that person, you know, on a monthly or, you know, every 3 months. If you make that transaction memorable for both of you, and they're on your LinkedIn, they'll track you through LinkedIn and your updates. That is an indirect connection that you are nurturing. And the reason why you need this network is, I always say, like in business, sometimes you need like these golden coins, like these 3 golden coins. I need somebody to do, I need to meet with the CEO of a company X. I don't have a direct line. Working with the middle management's not going to get me there. It's going to put another 3 months. Let me see who I know, my network. Pick up the phone, and before you know it, I have a meeting with the CEO, right? I use that one golden coin, and I use it wisely. I was asked to be part of the Minority in Sports Advisory Board by this woman named Shayna. I met her in 2017. She is the most inquisitive person, so I always remember her. And I always said, like, how can I help you? She's like, no, that's okay. And then she said just this week, I didn't ask for help. I was very careful when I needed a favor from you, Sandra. And so this is when I asked you for help to be in my advisory board. And that was 3 years later. So think about the power of what your Rolodex can do for your company. And your company, I mean that you are your CEO of your business. So allocate time for that. Make it a priority, as much as making the priority of professional growth and development. Networking is professional growth and development. So a couple of things that I wanted to be very crystal clear. Zoom is a new office. I don't know how many of you guys have seen the viral thing about a man who stood up and he was in his underwear. Literally, I'm dressed up because I had a bunch of business meetings and I'm wearing red shoes. Like, I'm not wearing slippers, I'm wearing pants. And by doing so, there's also been enough research that you show up differently. You show up more confident, you show up to be in the game. So I know oftentimes we laugh, like we have the top is really nice and we're wearing sweats. Think about the psychological impact you're bringing when you show up into that Zoom meeting. And always prepare yourself, look at your agenda ahead. If there's a link to a video conferencing, whether it's Zoom, Teams, WebEx, BlueJeans, there's so many out there, plan for it to be video. Because you can't go wrong. I mean, at least you over prepared. Should nobody use video? Fantastic. But plan for that. When you have interviews, be damn sure that you test out the link before the interviews happen. But no, just assume Zoom is a new office. Virtual coffee chats are the new water cooler talk. If it's not happening in your company, you create it. Like let's all catch up, very informal, 30 minutes, coffee chat. Let's talk about the Super Bowl. Who liked the ads? Just know that you're probably going to be the one that's moderating and driving the conversations. But sometimes it's great not to talk about work. It's just hang out with your colleagues. Be that cheerleader. And the reason why you want to do that is you learn more about your employees, the new ones that are joining that you did not meet prior to COVID. And we all need a little bit of levity. And so think about the water cooler talk that happened when you were going and grabbing water and the chit chat. Do it virtual coffee chats, do an early happy hour, whatever makes sense given your company and your organization. The non-work chit chat will go a long way. You'll better understand your employees and who they are. If you're a leader and you're managing a team, you're a leader that establishing a business, better, if you don't have EQ, better tune up your EQ. I like to highlight Saf, who is my boss. He just joined Intel in October, November, and he did a business all hand just recently. His first slide was about take care of you and your mental health. A recognition that we're all struggling and we are all carrying our own burden and crosses. So I think, and there was an article in one of the journals highlighting the future leader and one of the traits the leader must have, it's EQ. You know, really understand the emotional side of your employees. Before we were rewarded by our IQ, EQ is just as important as IQ. Add a new task to your many things to do, your mental health. There has been already enough research in terms of impact of China and other countries that massive depression is happening. There's a high suicide rate. Do not, I don't care how strong you are, discount what's happening in your subconscious and conscious. And you know, somebody was asking me, like, what are your life hacks? I can share mine, but mine may not be the right things for you. Like for me, it's called The Miracle Morning. There's somebody that authored a book around this topic, but I adjusted it for me. You know, meditation, sunrise yoga, running, journaling, reading about self-growth. I do all of that, gratitude and self-affirmation. I do all of that before my 7:30 a.m. meeting or 8 o'clock. And if I have a 7 a.m. meeting, I will skip my workout because I tend to run outside and it's too dark and I'm a woman. I'll do a mini, like 5-minute, 10-minute movement with yoga. So that's my life hack. And I know when I don't do it, I'm off. So think about the different things. I take little mini trips because I can't be, you know, in this 900 square foot apartment. I will literally go crazy. So I've done my little, I have my tools and they change. But honestly, they change along my journey of COVID, and I adapt accordingly based on what my body's telling me that I need. The other thing too, God, I used to be like, if you ask for help, you suck. I think asking for help is a new cool. I started that and showed the example of moms with a bunch of kids. No, like help is a self-awareness that there are gaps that you have, and you have the confidence in yourself to ask for help. So I know when I get people to say, hey, I need help here, I'm like, wow, super self-aware, is not afraid to ask for help. I want this type of person on my team. And then the last thing I want to share, and I'm going to pass the baton to Jess around her, I think, 12 life hacks in terms of when you're onboarding at a company, boundaries. Add boundaries to your checklist of things you got to get done. Meaning, if it's important to have lunch for you, for your own sanity, that 12 to 1 is a no-fly zone. Nobody can touch it. And if somebody says the meeting's important, ask why is it important? Can it not be done at a different time? I know this is really hard if you're starting your career and you want to over deliver. But I also think if you have an honest conversation with your manager around, hey, these are times that I need for me, so I can so when I show up, you get maximum productivity out of me. So how do we make this work for how do we make it work so it's a win-win for both? So you can have those conversations. Arguably, it's just really hard for human beings to create boundaries and know when to say no, or know how to be self-disciplined. And I think this becomes very important in the world of COVID, of really establishing your boundaries of, I don't take meetings after 5 o'clock, because when you're doing 7 to 5 and I'm not moving from conference to conference, I'm literally sitting here without any movement, I'm going to be counterproductive. So 5 o'clock is my boundary, no more meetings. And I create my breaks. I do my thing that's all about me and my daughter, whoever it is. And so in my morning is my boundary, and maybe everything in between I give. So just figure out what's important for you and establish those boundaries, and have the conversation with your family, with your colleagues and your manager, for those that get impacted by those boundaries that you have established. And for that, starting a job, being remote isn't easy. So Jess, what has been your tips? Because you have been a success story for this.
Thank you. Yes, I will. Much credit to you too, Sandra. You'll find some of these along the way. As I mentioned earlier, I started at Intel just a few weeks after sports shut down. So we're at Intel Sports, of course. The day that I quit my previous job in venture capital was the day that the NBA shut down games, and then every sport followed the weekend after. And I thought to myself, what did I just do? Was that the biggest mistake I could have made? Am I going to get a call from Sandra any moment that says, never mind, it looks like a pandemic is going down? But at the same time, we thought, okay, well, I was planning to move from Pennsylvania to Silicon Valley. I'm just outside of Philadelphia right now. And Sandra said, let's just hold on and see how things pan out. And we'll start working remotely for now, and we'll figure it out as time goes on. So thanks to her pushing me to write down some of the strategies I've used over the past year, I've actually published a longer version of this on LinkedIn, which you can check out when you have some time to read through the details for each one of these. But I did want to call out just 5 specifically that have really helped me as you start either going through educational programs online. We're all still trying to learn. We're trying to meet new folks. I've been volunteering and making friends online, and as well as starting a new job online. So all of these have helped me create really meaningful relationships with people I've never met before. So first things first, as I tell everybody, it's not just to ask questions, but ask questions that can't be Googled. If you come to the table without having done your research and show that you weren't proactive to put forth an effort to see if something that you need to know is online, you're saying that your time is more valuable than that person's time. So I'm always trying to be very cognizant of that. I came to my interview with Sandra with 400 pages of research printed out. I read it on the 5-hour flight, and then I highlighted things that just were not on the internet that I wanted to show. I was thinking strategically and was looking for more information and deeper dives on specific topics and initiatives. Number 4 is very important and near and dear to my heart, because I think it's something that everybody should have, whether they're working remotely or in person, but it has helped immensely with onboarding. Sandra set up a buddy and a mentor when I first joined. The mentor is somebody that I can talk to really about career progression. I have those conversations with Sandra, of course, but around macro intel or just any specific question to ask a mentor around career development, she's there for me. And then my buddy, who I speak to once a week, he's there to really help with the cultural, maybe sensitive, maybe something that's not super pressing, but would really help me understand the ecosystem that I'm in a lot better. So those weekly calls have made such a huge difference in just understanding various personalities and various teams, and, well, why did this client say things this way? It's not appropriate to bring up in the meeting, but you have that dedicated space with a trusted buddy that you can ask all those questions. So if your boss isn't like Sandra and doesn't set that up for you, take some time in the beginning to just feel out the situation and see if there is somebody who you click with initially and can trust and can set up an ally in that way. Number 7 is what I believe has gotten me through my entire career is being entrepreneurial and innovative. You weren't hired just to get the job done as is, and you're not just there to fill the status quo. So my biggest thing is to constantly challenge and address any problems from almost all angles that you can think of. Put yourself in everybody else's shoes if you're in a meeting, try to figure out what their motives are, how can we all grow together, and act as if you were a founder of a startup. That's not everybody's MO. Not everybody's made to start their own company, but even within a larger organization, everybody is meant to push growth forward and have an innovative spirit in that way. Sandra already touched on boundaries, but I can share a couple of tips very briefly for things that I've done dealing with a global team. Like I said, I'm on the East Coast, and most of my clients are in Europe, as well as half of my team, and the other half of my team and some clients are based on the West Coast. So as you can imagine, I can accommodate everybody at all hours of the day. So whether it's usually from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., I can count on meetings most days going from that time range. I set up blocks on my calendar, like Sandra said, for working out, for lunch, for dinner, for Jeopardy. Yes, I'm a grandmother. And for taking walks with my neighbor who it was my middle school teacher and just means a lot to me. So we take walks twice a week in the afternoon at 3 o'clock. And the time on my calendar is booked. Only Sandra's admin knows that it's flexible. So I have it separated aside for very urgent meetings. But otherwise, you can count on me trying to take that middle portion of my day back just to split up the European time zone and the West Coast time zone. So that's how, even a year later, I'm still trying to master that. And again, to just round everything out, I listed spread positivity, but it's really, the question is, what do you want people to say when they pick up the phone, like Sandra said, and say, what do you think about this person? That's literally what I have written in my blog post there. I want everybody who I call on my team or a client to be excited when they see my name on the phone. That's just a personal, I don't know, something sentimental that I have about a lot of friends and coworkers, a feeling that I get when certain people call me. So that's my mantra is, how do I want people to feel when I call them? I want them to be excited to answer the phone, even if we're working through a very tough situation, for them to know that it's not going to end up with, any bitter sentiment or arguments or anything like that, that we'll have a positive conversation and hopefully resolve the issue. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions about any of the others that I didn't highlight, let me know.
I think we'll go through questions shortly. Thank you, Jess, and thank you for writing. Her article is actually pretty astounding. I know Jennifer Schwab saw it and she's like, let's talk about this. So we'll send a link out. It was really good. Just to wrap up, make a plan for you. Just as like you're making plans for your businesses that you support, make one for you. Remember, every touch point is a communication touch point, even when you don't think it is. How you engage, how you show up, how you present, all of that's really important. And the last quote that I want to leave you with, in the world that society tries to put us in a box, and the world that took me most of my entire life to figure it out, except for the last 15 years, be yourself, because everyone else is already taken. So with that, I think we have time for questions. We're a little bit over, but open to any questions, comments. I think I tried to answer some of your questions along the way, so. Nothing? somebody must have a question that they're like, I don't know if I want to ask it, but you should.
I don't have a question, but I can sympathize a lot with Jess because I have been traveling between Europe and Boston, and I have had 3 teams. So I had my CTO in New York, I was in Boston, 2 of my developing teams were in Croatia and Zagreb, and a 3rd was in India. Managing that has been a challenge. So I do understand how it is to have your day spanned over 24 hours and trying to figure out how you can keep in touch with everybody and trying to find a time of day, which usually ends up being 5 a.m. for some reason, where you can actually communicate with a team in Croatia, with a team in India, and with your CTO simultaneously. And luckily the CTO was also very, very flexible, and he just wanted the whole team to be together. So we did it that way.
Anita, and what time do you go to sleep? So when you have the 5 a.m. meeting, then what time are you going to sleep?
That is a good question. I had a practice, as long as I was feeling okay, I just went with it. I have such a type of body that I usually am fine doing with 4 or 5 hours of sleep. But then it does happen that it accumulates over time, and then I would take like an 8 or 9 hour, and that for me is very long, a night. And sometimes it would happen that I would say, okay, I've had enough. I'm taking 3 days rest. I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about my invention, nothing. Taking 3 days rest. And sometimes part of that rest was literally lying in bed, reading and watching TV, watching stupid stuff just to give my mind a break. Because when you're so focused, your brain does need downtime.
Yep.
And you have to figure it out what works for you. I had to do it this way because I had some health challenges. So for somebody who is healthy, I would always say, go out, walk, take, etc. But if you have some health issues, you will probably choose something else, like me. Literally watching TV, just relaxing and refusing to think about any issues that you might have at work. And then for me, it worked. I would recharge during that time. Then when Monday came, I was ready to have, again, 12 hours every single day to work completely focused.
Yeah. I think, Anita, you're definitely speaking to finding what works for you, and making that work. And it's great that your boss was accommodating the 5 a.m.
I was the boss. That was my company.
Okay, you were okay. So, okay. And the people were accommodated. The one that was in Boston accommodated the 5 a.m. That was great.
I was the one in Boston.
Okay.
And
Because you
my
had another person in the East Coast.
My CTO was in New York. He was the one who was accommodating. And,
okay, that's what I got missed. Okay. He could have said no, but he's just like, okay. So there you go, asking for help. You need to accommodate this, and he had to create his own routine.
Yeah, he did. And he had a different challenge. He had a mother with Alzheimer's. So for him, it was, again, everybody is having their own challenges in their private lives, trying to build a business, trying to do their jobs. So it's not just having a mother. You might have an ailing family member, and like Jess said, she allocated time slots. This is for that. Nobody touched me at that time.
Yep, 100%.
That was the same Sandra, I'm sure you recall the situation that happened a few weeks after I was set to move. In the middle of COVID, my mother had a stroke and was airlifted to a hospital an hour away. And I called Sandra on the way there. I said, I'm sorry, I don't know how long I'll be gone, but I'll be gone. And you have a team that jumps in and takes care of things for you when you're unavailable. And Sandra, thank goodness, of course, understood exactly what was going on. And because I had been sheltered in place for almost a year, I could be with her and in the hospital. And that was a flex time that was totally unexpected, but I had a team that was able to accommodate.
We are definitely living in challenging times.
And I think we need to remind those leaders or those managers that are very robotic and are all about the business, a friendly reminder. This is why I think sometimes being vulnerable with what's happening in your personal life gives a little bit more flexibility and also drives a change in culture. So we've got to push for those conversations to happen. But to Anita and Jess's point, every person, believe it or not, they're carrying a burden that you may not even know is happening in their home.
Anyone else have questions?
Yes.
I figured if no one had questions, I would ask some of the ones that were sent ahead of time. Do you have any suggestions for your physical workstation? I know, Sandra, you touched on, how you always, dress for work. But, like things like where physically in your household you work and what your little zone looks like. Any suggestions for that?
I have to tell you, everybody has a different household setup, and I can't answer that for you. Just all I can say is I do not have a desk. It's called my dining room table, and I'm all virtual, so I minimize everything. So I set it up in a way that I can remove it as soon as 5 o'clock hits, which I told you, put everything away. I don't want to see anything related to work. That's because I have chosen to live in a 900 square foot apartment because that's what I could afford. Other people have other luxuries. They have an office, right? That's great. Other people have 2 families living at home. And so is it that chair on the side and you use all the various different backgrounds that exist, like for Zoom and Teams, or you create your own? You have to figure out what works best for you. And there's no easy answer. All I want to say, and I was interesting, all I want to say is that we do get judged, and it's going to take time to change. But I was looking at LinkedIn before we joined. There is this picture of, I think it's the founder of Bumble, and she's holding her child. Mm-hmm. If you guys can see, going IPO.
Yeah.
Like eventually the norms are going to change. We're just not there yet. But see, when would you see that type of picture? Not in a very long time. So what's starting to shift? We're just not there yet. And I say that, and I'm open, transparent, because I have heard whispers of people, even females, by the way, like, did you see XYZ, had their kid jumping around or had the cat? And I'm just like, look at their output. But not everybody's like me. So that is the reality that people judge.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that we're going to continue to be working remotely even, after the pandemic?
Some companies already made the decision. Some companies have already said 100% remote. So those companies are overt. If you're interviewing for companies and remote's important, you should ask them what their remote policy is. Until we have different cohorts, some people have to go into the office because they have a manufacturing job. You need to be physically there. Some people have, it's a cohort that to be more productive, you should be in the office. And then there's people like Jess and I, like, we don't really need to be in the office. What we do need is we need to be on the road. Like, we need to get the job done, because like the sales cycle or working with new partners, to do it in Zoom takes many more months, where you can go meet with your partner, have a 2-day whiteboarding, go over dinner, like get to know the people, casual dinner or coffee. It's just much easier in person. And so the sales cycle, the partnership cycles are now not 2 days, it takes multi-months. So companies have already decided what they're going to do. That's important. That goes back to values. If flexibility on the job is a value that you value, ask them about the remote work policy. Intel is having options. However, we're getting a new CEO, and the new CEO in his previous company had everybody go remote. So I think we'll have some on-site and some remote.
Mhm.
What is easier for you personally, remote or in office?
Neither. It's called the plane. Because my job is meeting people. My job is on the road. Like, my job is meeting, and Jess will attest, like, it's partners, it's getting deals done. You're on the plane, you work on the contracts. Yeah, maybe I'll go into the office to see 1 or 2 people, but we're always traveling because we're a global company. So I could go to the office and maybe see 4 of my colleagues. But what I miss is being fixated at your desk. Like, even if you're at the office for 8 hours, Intel has one conference room, another conference room, even that little break to get up, put your laptop down and move. I didn't realize how precious that was. The mental break. That was your 10-minute break. Now it's like back to back, not moving. Like, I've been here since 7 a.m. I have not moved. That's not healthy. That's not healthy.
Oh, that's probably the only thing maybe we disagree on then. I love being right here in the same spot all day. Like, I love just walking downstairs, getting a snack, coming upstairs. I love that my husband's in the office next door. I think that's partially why I'm like, I don't ever want to be like more than 10 feet away from him again. But that's my problem.
Yeah, but
And
see, that's
we
why
have
we're so
this-
different, right?
Yeah.
Like, she just tells me her story. I'm like, Jess, I would never want to live in your world. I used to do the commute. Thank God I don't want the commute anymore. I use that now to go work out and do my miracle morning. But this is the thing that was really hard with your guys' questions. It's not one answer, because we're all so different. We're all living our own thing. We're all our own person. We're all having our different, agendas of how we want to get ahead, and which means a different type of hustle. And so what I tell everybody is just pick little pieces from different people. Go listen to other leaders and start to pick like what's right for you, and try it. And it may not be right for you. So I think it's a lot of testing and trying and evolving, because sometimes you get tired of the same old thing. You're like, okay, I'm done with that. Something new.
Sandra, what do you think about the messaging around Kamala Harris's election to VP, specifically around her being a brown woman or Black woman, and all of the hope that's put behind that? Like, I feel like when a woman is brought into certain executive spaces, there's just like, everyone's like, there's going to be so much change and it's just going to be so different, and the hope is it'll be better. Yeah, I don't have it. What's your take on women being...
As they break through the glass ceiling, like as a woman breaks through the glass ceiling, whether they're a CEO, whether like Kamala Harris, of Black and Indian descent, VP, Am I getting your
Will, my question is there too much hope being put behind women being able to usher in this new feeling of management? So you're talking about, you know, the boss who is robotic versus the one who is more, who has a higher EQ. Is there too much emphasis placed on being, you know, the woman being the one to change the way the leadership style has been done for years? Is there
The savior? Do you mean the savior of, is that a firm, is that a good word to describe it?
That's how I've heard it described.
I guess I don't know what my
I understand. I would say in any role that is a person filling the role that is unexpected, because it can happen for men, you know, look, when you get a nurse and it's a man, you're like, what? I do think there's a level of accountability that you have to accept with that. Which means, like a Kamala Harris, I would say she needs to be able to celebrate the small wins, because the pressure will be, as we look to the next elections, could a woman do it? And we as females have to be very selective of when we take on roles and the degree that we're set up for failure. So for example, it is a known fact that often females that are CEOs at companies that get brought on board is because the company is so disheveled. And that the woman is able to change it because we're good at multitasking and we can do that. But sometimes the companies, you can't save it. You can't save it. And so we take on these roles. So now all of a sudden, like Marissa Mayer failed at Yahoo, like you can have a list. There's so many examples of females that have taken up CEO roles that the challenge was so significant that what?
To clean up a mess that can't be cleaned up. And then,
yeah, I mean, for a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. So I would say as a woman, be very selective of the leadership role that you're going to take, and know that you have the world on your shoulders, and always remember to celebrate the small wins. So I have to tell you, and we talked about this, I think it was Vogue that covered Kamala Harris. I'm going to get to fashion now. I'm a little bit into fashion but how they covered her as the first woman VP, which is very historic. But like how they did it was very, in my opinion, not doing justice to what the historic moment. It was very casual, and we know she's casual.
To Vogue?
Yeah, Vogue. Yeah, I know she wore her All Stars or her Chucks, which is fantastic. But you can show Chucks and the badass fact that she's the first woman VP, and she is very capable of doing it. And I do think she's all about getting the job done, but she needs that her PR team is going to have to highlight the small wins. So when it comes back up next for re-election, we know that she played a vital role in hopefully the turnaround of our country, because we all, whether, I don't care who's in leadership, but a leader that can turn around the company for good. The US for good, making sure people have jobs and all that stuff. So there is pressure, but that goes back to understanding you're an unlevel playing field. She knows that she knows what she's walking into, and I'm very confident. And by the way, somebody had a comment around height. Maria was telling me, I don't know who it was, about 5'2". She's 5'1" something centimeters. I'm 5'2". Justice Ginsburg is 5'2". So
I'm 5'0".
What?
I'm 5'0".
You're 5'0"? Oh my God. Okay, I thought you were 5'5". Okay,
Oh
there you go.
I'm like envious of you.
Oh my God. Height is a bunch of, you know what? When I was telling Maria, I'm like, that's a sabotage. You're sabotaging yourself. Just don't think of yourself like, you know, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. Our height, our ethnicity, it's not a weakness. It's that we get they do become challenges, like there's microaggressions, but be so damn confident in yourself that you're like, yeah, whatever. Like, yes, I know being a woman and a Latina, I get it. I can give you a story every single day, but that's not going to stop me. And I call them out, and I call them out in the appropriate time. Do I call it out now, or do I wait, or do I send them an email, or do I just observe and then have a broader conversation with the person that's, challenging and creating our lives a little bit more difficult than it should be.
Yeah, the question was about like how do I get people to take me seriously even though I'm 5 foot, and my best advice is like, even though you're shorter than them, still be above them, still take the high road.
Yeah, totally. You know what? It's your productivity, your output. If you get the job done, there's no question your height does not even become an issue.
Mm-hmm.
I remember because I was laughing at the question. I was saying like a couple years ago, I was at a conference and this woman came up. She's like, "What? How do you get ahead when you're so short?" I'm like, "Oh my God, it's the first question. I never thought I was short. So never thought about it. So just don't think about it. Just get the job done."
I have actually the opposite problem.
You're tall.
I'm 5'9", and I have actually quite big feet, 42 European. I think that's 11 US.
Yep.
So getting shoes that fit me, that are feminine, is almost impossible. And that they're also business. So I usually end up wearing some kind of office flat shoes. If I wear high heels, I will be taller than I already am. And I'm towering over other women. And so it feels very awkward. So I just wear flats. And so the image again of, I sometimes envy the other women. Okay, they can dress up feminine. When you are shorter, you look feminine. And I look, I don't know, something like a mix between a man and a woman. So I have a different challenge.
As a fellow size 11 wearing person, I've got like 70 plus shoes in my closet. I am not going to wear that label as having man feet, okay? I take care of them and it's all good. But I think it really gets back to your point too, Sandra. It's about feeling, right? And doing that inner work so that you can move into any space feeling confident, capable, courageous, whatever it means to you to just get the job done.
Yep. And I think I meet very few people that do work on themselves, because we're so busy thinking about everybody else, our kids, our partner, our work, and well, oops, what about me? So I think and I have to tell you, the people that I meet that actually focus on themselves are some of the most successful leaders. Steve Jobs did a lot about that. He did a lot of that. I meet a lot of leaders that they get up early, they do their reading, they do their exercise. That's important. Oh my God, any last question? I didn't realize I can talk to you guys forever. I think we're out of time.
I just dropped the link in. I realized I asked people to do work and that was not right. So I just dropped it in for you.
Any other last minute question? Before we go, it's Friday and start to enjoy our happy hour. For some people, it's already 7:30.
Where can people reach you if they have other questions or want to pick your brain about anything?
It's called LinkedIn. Just two.
All righty.
Okay.
Well,
thank you all. I appreciate it. Thank you, Maria and Althea, and thank you, Entity and Jennifer, for doing this amazing program. Super fortunate that you guys have this program. I wish I had it, but I still tap into it indirectly through Jennifer. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra and Jess.
Bye. Have a great
you.
Friday. Have a great
Thank
evening.
you.
Bye.